back out to the track for more action on the Championship Racing Network.
All right, so looks like CRN Live on YouTube is back up as I have control of it once again. Did a reset. So if you were with us on the first stream, do us a favor, back out of that and go into do a kind of an update on that CRN Live, and you can get the visuals again if you so choose. And thank you very much for doing so. We appreciate your support. If you're on the radio side, well, all of that doesn't mean anything. You're just listening. We appreciate that too. All right, so over to Formula One, because the biggest next controversy after the whole legalese stuff, to use a polite term, when it comes to NASCAR, this probably is going to be another situation. These two things are going to be a couple of situations, I guess. We talked a little bit about this during the Cross Flags podcast on Wednesday as well. At the end of the U.S. Grand Prix at Circuit of the Americas, race stewards reported about 200 people were able to get access to the track surface before all the racers were off the racing surface, and that is a no-no. In looking at what those fans had to do, they had to climb over a catch fence, drop about 6 feet down to the other side to get to the ground, then they had to go under some debris fencing. Think about that for a second. This isn't one of those things where, like, you know, you just cut a hole in the fencing and boom, you're on the track. No, they had to climb over a catch fence and then go under a debris fence, which they were able to do, and they got access to the front straightaway, and they started making their way down to the paddock area, which F1 and the FIA calls that a track invasion. And this was the first so-called track invasion in the 12 years that F1 has been at Circuit of the Americas, but the FIA, which has been trying to crack down on this, has, as they have done to other race promoting operations, fined the promoters of the U.S. Grand Prix 500,000 euros, or about $543,000. But they suspended 350,000 euros of that fine with one provision: that no other track incursions happen at COTA at any FIA-sanctioned event through the end of the 2026 season. So they're on 2 years probation, effectively. The FIA also sent a missive, a letter, in case you're curious as to what that means, to the race officials, said that the rest of the fine should be, quote, dedicated to additional motorsport safety by the FIA Safety Department, ordering the promoters to come up with a plan to keep this type of event from occurring again in the near future. Let me repeat. These people had to climb over a catch fence and drop about 6 feet to the ground before they then had to climb under a second set of fencing meant for debris in order to go rush the track. How much more do you want them to do? I mean, are we doing the same thing that presidential hopeful Donald Trump wants to do, and that's build a ridiculous-sized wall on the border between Texas and Mexico? There's a reason we have fencing. And the reason that it's chain link or wire for the most part is to allow people to see through it. How tall do you want them to make that? How far into the ground do you want them to bury it? How much more do you think that the race promoters or the track at Circuit of the Americas can do in order to try to dissuade people from being the people that rushed the Who concert in 1979 that killed half a dozen people? By the way, if you don't know what I'm talking about, that was pretty much the end of general admission at major concerts around the country. The Who was playing at Cincinnati's old Riverfront Stadium. Remember that, kids? Where the Reds and the Bengals used to share a stadium? You know, back in those old days. The Who comes in, they're going to have a concert. Thousands of people buy tickets. All general admission. But you're talking about the gates outside the building. When they open up the gates, predictably everybody goes rushing because they want to get as close to the stage as they can. One person trips, falls down. Another person trips, falls down. Soon enough, several people trip and fall down. About half a dozen people got trampled to death. That's at a concert. That's people. Now, granted, these guys were on the front straight, and the F1 racers are on the front are on their cool-down lap. They're not slated to go back down the front straightaway. But should they? And a person gets hit by a race car? How bad is that? So I get the FIA's concern here, but I take you back to what all they had to do to get access to the track surface. How much more do you want them to do at the track to try and dissuade and keep people from being able to get access to the track surface before the race is officially done and all the racers are in the paddock area? There ain't much more they can do. These people jumped over one set of fencing and jumped under another barrier, or slid under another barrier, as the case may be. I've said this before, I'll say it again. You get a group of people out there, a person is smart. Men in Black said this best. A group of people are dumb, panicky, and will do all kinds of crazy stuff. I basically boiled it down to this. A person is smart. A group of people is only as smart as the dumbest person in the group. That's it. 200 people or so followed the dumbest person in the group by saying, hey, I can get out there first. Cars are on the track. If I want to see a trophy presentation, that's fine. I'm not trying to get that close and have the possibility of getting run over. So I'm not really sure what in the world people at COTA or the race promoters at Circuit of the Americas for the U.S. Grand Prix can do. Good luck to them. We also noted in the race recap that race stewards penalized Lando Norris for racing outside the track limits to gain a position. Penalized him, added 5 seconds to his total time. That dropped him officially from 3rd to 4th in the official standings from the U.S. Grand Prix behind Max Verstappen. It's a big-time penalty when you're talking about the heat of the points race, where Lando Norris has been consistently, slowly but surely reeling in Max Verstappen for the driver's points. Lando Norris has a whole lot more support than most people realize. Many drivers questioning the application of this particular penalty, specifically why wasn't Verstappen hit with the same penalty? Verstappen was trying to hold off Lando Norris with 4 laps left in the race, and he himself went outside of the track limits to push Norris out there as well. So why didn't the penalty apply to him too? That's the big question. 7-time F1 champion Lewis Hamilton said, quote, they probably need to make some adjustments for sure. Also, we do have inconsistencies through rulings depending on which stewards are there. As a sport, we need to level up in all areas. I experienced it many times with Max. You shouldn't be able to just launch the car up the inside and then go off and still hold on to that position. And that is pretty much the way that it happened, if you watched it. Hamilton's Mercedes teammate George Russell said that Verstappen was exploiting a known loophole in that rule and, quote, should have been penalized, unquote. Carlos Sainz of Red Bull added that the FIA needs to better define the rule, saying, quote, it changes the way we go racing. It means that the guy defending on the inside can brake as late as they want, and they can fake the fact that you're trying to hit the apex when you are maybe not. It needs to be clarified because in that case, they were both to blame. Max for running wide and Lando gaining a position off the track because of it. That's why that specific scenario is a very complicated one on how to rule it. The drivers have figured out that there's a loophole there. If you're technically the driver defending, maybe you get away with it more than the driver who's trying to attack. McLaren agreed with that wholeheartedly. The specific look at it from Carlos Sainz, they filed what they call a right of review concerning the time penalty assessed to Norris. The FIA released a statement to the media on Thursday, said that they would look at it late on Friday in order to have the situation dealt with before the racing began in earnest this weekend in Mexico City. And late on Friday, the FIA predictably rejected the appeal of their ruling, leaving the points as we stated earlier in the show. There is no further appeal, by the way. I say predictably rejected it because if I've noted anything about the FIA, especially in the last several years, they're not big about having their rulings questioned. And in this case, this would be a fairly high-profile admission that you were wrong. They're not really willing to do that. It's kind of like NASCAR. A few years ago, I want to say it was 2 or 3 years ago, Tony Stewart said, why would I file an appeal on a ruling that hurt our drivers? It doesn't really do much good. You lose 90+% of the time, or at least it seems that way. Kind of seems that way when you're thinking about appealing an F1 ruling, too. Officials with COTA by the way, are also in talk with the FIA about possible track limit solutions. One possible fix is to do what they did in Austria, which is make those white lines that delineate the racing surface from out of bounds a little bit more pronounced so that the FIA cameras can then be installed. That would be, well, the equivalent of AI, I guess. And it would then, if the camera caught something that it felt like the driver was out of bounds, it would throw up a warning flag, and race stewards who are in a remote location could then go back, rewind the video, rewind the tape, although we don't use tape anymore, rewind the video on it and look at what the computer deems as questionable and figure out whether or not it's out of bounds. Expect a decision on that soon. At this point in time, I think really it's probably a situation of you just have to paint the lines better. It's probably been quite a while since those lines have been painted anyway. And yes, the track looked good. I watched the race. I was glued to it. I love watching F1 just as much as I love watching NASCAR. I love watching pretty much any kind of racing. So I was watching this race. And for a track that opened up for business a dozen years ago, 13 years ago now, it's really looking good. You can tell where they've done a couple of things to kind of improve some situations, but for the time that it's been out there, it's holding up remarkably well. I got to give them that. Max Verstappen talked about the head honchos at Formula One, not regarding the Lando Norris penalty situation, instead talking about his own ongoing feud where he will not participate in F1 sanctioned press conferences. He simply said, quote, drivers need more power in saying how the series is run. Really? You think so? I don't mean any disrespect to Max Verstappen or any of the other 19 drivers that are currently running in F1 or the 20 drivers who will don helmets and get into the cars next year, many of which are carryovers, but there'll be a couple of new ones. And I mean this for Formula One. I mean it for Indycar. I mean it for all levels of NASCAR, the NHRA, IMSA, or whatever series you want to talk about. Really doesn't matter to me. How much more power do you really want to give the drivers? Should they have a say? Yes. Should there be a drivers group that has the ability to sit down at the table and talk with the head honchos of fill in whatever race series you got? Yes. But where do you draw the line before the inmates start running the asylum, so to speak, and it just becomes a free-for-all? Here's where I disagree with Max Verstappen. I'm not so certain that the drivers need more power in Formula One or IndyCar or NASCAR for that matter. And if they do, I'm not so certain that it needs to be a whole lot more. This is, for me, a 28-year-old, now three-time, going for four-time champion in Max Verstappen, pitching a 5-year-old's fit because he didn't get the toy that he wanted at the local Wally World. Verstappen goes on to say, quote, it's a tough one, I know, but this is something I think is very important for the future. For the young drivers, not so much for us. I mean, I'm happy with what I'm doing, even if many things change. If I'm not happy, I stop. It's done. But the young kids that are now working towards their goal to get into Formula One, that's the main priority, to make sure for them that it's not only going to get worse from what it is. Asked what he meant by more power, Verstappen replied, quote, voting rights. At least that we can actually be involved in the discussion. I mean, that would be ideal. I know that's very unlikely, but if you leave it up to the teams anyway, it's going to be a disaster because they only speak for themselves. That's why you have the Grand Prix Drivers Association. That's your voting power. That's why the GPDA was put into existence in the first place. It's led by George Russell. We talked about it last week on the air. Maybe, Max, you ought to listen to our show. You have voting rights. You have a voice. It is the Grand Prix Drivers Association. Work with them. We noted last week that Sauber's very happy with Mattia Binotto as their new team boss. He's been at the races. He's been at Sauber's race shop. He's been at Austria, all over Audi HQ in Germany since the hire. The team still hasn't decided what they're going to do with their driver lineup yet. What we do know is this. Nico Hülkenberg is indeed coming over from Haas F1. Still don't know who the second driver is going to be. Not yet. Sauber hasn't scored a single championship point in over a calendar year, and as I noted last week, really hasn't sniffed one in earnest this year. So when might we expect that announcement of driver number 2? Binotto said, making a short story long, quote, "We know we've got a journey ahead of us. It's going to be a long journey. I think that we need to somehow choose a lineup that is the best one in order to support and help the team to become better." Okay. Let me ask the question again in true political moderator fashion. When do you think we're going to hear about an announcement of the second driver? Binotto continued, quote, "Both options have merits. 2 experienced drivers certainly is the best way to help a team develop. On the other side, having a rookie can be a way of giving new energy and fresh air to the team." Hey, Mattia, are you running for office? This is an extremely political answer. Oh, wait, sorry. We finally get to the answer. Quote, "We will need to come to a decision, I would say, before mid-November." Now you know why I said making a short story long. They did have one of those potential rookies, by the way, in the car in FP1, free practice session number 1 on Friday. His name is Robert Schwartzman, Israeli-born driver. He ended up with a penalty that he might not actually ever serve. How the heck do you do that, you ask? Well, here's the deal. Race stewards said, quote, "While the race stewards recognize the driver is not scheduled to start on any race in the near future, we have applied the consistent penalty, meaning that Schwartzman, should he ever get a Formula One start, will have to give up 5 qualifying positions from where he qualified the car." Why? Well, because, as we have noted in the past, teams have an obligation by FIA rules to run a young driver in at least 2 practice sessions throughout any given year. They did that. Schwartzman was given the chance in Mexico when he was given the opportunity to practice Lando Norris's car in FP1. And they had a yellow flag, and he passed cars under yellow flag conditions. That's a big no-no. So he got that penalty. Should he ever get a Formula One start, from now until he passes off this mortal coil, Robert Schwartzman will have a 5 grid spot penalty hanging over his head. Doesn't matter when said start may occur. That kind of sucks. It's kind of funny, though. When we come back, we'll talk about McLaren and their situation. I'm sorry, they didn't pull Lando Norris out of the car. McLaren did pull Lando Norris out of the car. We'll tell you who filled in for him. In this case, it was Valtteri Bottas who they pulled out of the Sauber car to put Robert Schwartzman in. Let me get that clear before we take this break. And when we come back, we'll talk about McLaren having pulled Lando out of the car, giving the same rule that Sauber did for Schwartzman. Who did they put in the car? Tell you next.
We will be right back with more on the Championship Racing Network. fuel only. Go, go, go. We're back to the Championship Racing Network.
We are indeed, as soon as the host actually turns the microphone on. I don't know. It's one of those things. You whiff on it. You thought you hit it. Turns out you didn't. Free practice session number 1. Yesterday, Sauber ended up putting Robert Schwartzman in instead of Valtteri Bottas. McLaren pulled Lando Norris out of his car. And using that same young driver rule, they put in IndyCar champion Pato O'Ward, who is a native of Mexico. What was his first impression of the F1 opportunity? Well, O'Ward said, quote, "I would have loved to have had some more chances, perhaps on the hard tire to prepare for the soft. But with having what we did, I can feel pretty pleased with what I got out of it for myself and with all the information that I was able to gather for the team, because they're obviously in a pretty important title fight. And I'm obviously here to help them stay where they are right now, if not improve. But it was a dream come true. I saw the Mexican flags. I saw floating Pato faces in certain areas. It was really cool. Pato O'Ward proved himself quite capable, too. Over the 21 laps that he ran, his best lap was only 0.3 of a second slower than Oscar Piastri's best lap, and Oscar Piastri is the regular other driver for McLaren. Not bad. And all of that despite having the same basic instructions as Cole Trickle in the film Days of Thunder. Don't crack up the car, kid. Being the primary one. The other one being that he needed to be able to bring information to the team, and apparently he was able to bring some, so congratulations to him. I know that this has been that situation for him that we were wondering whether or not he was going to get that opportunity. He, Alex Palou, a couple of others. But yeah, I mean, for him to be able to go out there and do what he did and be only 0.3 of a second slower and not really have a whole lot of experience behind the wheel of an F1 car, that's doing pretty good for himself. Formula One also announced a new partnership with American Express. Could change the way people get their tickets. It depends on what race we're talking about, and I'll explain that here in a second. This new partnership expands the already existing deal between Formula One and American Express. Basically, it goes from just having covered the Western Hemisphere races, the 3 races here in the United States of America, Miami, COTA, Las Vegas, Mexico City, and Brazil. Now it covers most of the Formula One world. The deal is also set to create a benefits package with some perks that includes pre-sale of tickets, Paddock Club access, grandstand tickets to select races while supplies last. The benefits of the card company partnership, I should say, will cover 15 of the 24 races on the 2025 schedule. It covers the previous ones that were covered, the Western Hemisphere races. It covers the Australian Grand Prix. It covers Asia, Singapore, China, Japan. And most of, if not all of the European races, basically all that it doesn't cover, the races in the Middle East and Baku, Azerbaijan. Not too bad. So if you got an American Express and you can afford a Formula One ticket, maybe there's some perks there. Let's see. As we talked about on the Cross Flags podcast, as we turn our attention to the Xfinity Series, Matt and I talked about William Sawalich joining Joe Gibbs Racing full-time in 2025. If you want our full rundown on that, by all means, go check that out. Sawalich, only 18 years old. He's got limited experience in the upper levels of NASCAR with 13 Craftsman Truck Series to his start, to be exact. All of them coming with Tricon Garage. 3 of them top 10 finishes. Okay. What this means for next year for Joe Gibbs Racing, who is a 4-car Xfinity Series operation, they're going to have William Sawalich in the 18. Brandon Jones returns to Joe Gibbs Racing after a 2-year stint with Junior Motorsports. Car number not actually announced, but seems likely it would probably be the 19 car, but that might change depending on Chandler Smith. Get back to him. Then you got the 54 car, which we recently noted has a new owner listed in Ty Gibbs. It'll feature another rookie in Taylor Gray. Again, Chandler Smith has yet to decide exactly what he's going to do in 2025. So there actually could be 4 full-time rides next year, or they could still be fielding that 4th car as that star car, where you get Cup Series drivers and people like William Sawalich coming in and filling in for X number of races throughout the course of the year. At this point in time, it's basically playing the waiting game to see what Chandler Smith decides. I think they would like him back. Again, he's a title contender this year. Has the pole position, as we noted, for today's race down at Homestead, Miami in the Xfinity Series. He's a good driver. I would think Joe Gibbs Racing would want him back. Chandler Smith might be trying to fight his way into the Cup Series. That many seats left for next year. Not that many seats there. We'll find out. Jeremy Clements Racing fields exactly 1 full-time car. It is the number 51, which is driven by the team owner, Clements himself. boasts a grand total of 4 full-time employees, but he has been able to make it work. In fact, you might have missed the fact, we did, that when we raced at Darlington back in August, Clements set a new Xfinity Series record. Most consecutive series starts, 383 to be exact, a streak that began early in the 2013 season, less than 2 years after he and his father started the team, and they've headed it ever since. If you remember the movie Bull Durham, Crash Davis, played by Kevin Costner, doesn't want the information out there that he's about to become the minor league home runs leader. They never really said exactly how many home runs it was, but he was about to become the minor league's history's all-time home runs leader. He said in that time, kind of a dubious distinction, don't you think? To have hit all those home runs in the minors and never really made it to the majors. He was there for about a month, he said, during the movie. I wonder if this is one of those same situations, because here's the thing. If you're in any particular series in the feeder ladder, you're in Formula 2, Formula 3, Formula 4, it doesn't matter if you're in Indy Next or, whatever, or if you're in the Xfinity, Craftsman Truck Series, ARCA Menard Series, your idea is to get to the top level, Formula 1, Indycar, Cup Series, right? He hasn't been able to really get to the Cup Series, but he's got 383 starts in the Xfinity Series, and he's done them consecutively. And for a single car operation, a mom and pop, or in this case, dad and son organization, that's actually a really, really cool mark. To me, it's not a rather dubious distinction at all. Because you stop and you think about the number of drivers that are now running Craftsman Truck Series and are most comfortable there. Matt Crafton, 3-time champion. Justin Allgaier, who we're going to talk about here in just a moment, who has found himself at the Cup Series level, didn't really care for it, seems to be much more comfortable running in the Xfinity Series. I think it's a cool deal, and I think Jeremy Clements needs to celebrate it. Absolutely. He recently talked to jski.com, talked about the milestone, said, quote, "Never tried to achieve that. It's not anything I ever even looked at. Racing is something I've always desired to do. I've chased it. I've been successful at it. Doing it in this series with your own team, it's incredibly difficult. I have fun doing it, and then I would love to have a chance to do it some other way. I'm still here trying to do the best that I can on the days that we can show up and do the right thing. We're fast. To be here with a small group of people week in and week out, it's hard to continue making all this work. And then it's really only gotten harder with all the competitive teams." Clements, despite the odds seemingly being stacked against him, not only has 383 consecutive starts to his credit, he's got 2 wins. Road America in 2017 and then the summer race at Daytona in 2022. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Partnership between the CW Network and Stewart-Haas Racing continues this weekend. Cole Custer's Double Zero featuring the network as a primary sponsor once again, this time highlighting WWE Next on the CW Network, part of their sports package. In addition, the man who has been nicknamed Stone Cold, kind of like wrestler Stone Cold Steve Austin, he was actually in Orlando just last night. He was helping promote the NASCAR race by appearing on WWE Next, the show itself. Apparently to be, quote-unquote, part of a tag team with Hank Walker and Tank Ledger, all while wearing his NASCAR fire suit. Walker and Ledger won the tag team event without Custer actually taking part in the match itself, but he did jump in for the post-match celebration. Said afterwards, quote, "Man, it's been awesome getting to know Hank, Tank, and everything involved here. I mean, these guys are so incredible. How they're flying around the ring, learning everything today was just absolutely insane. So it was awesome to have this opportunity and collaboration and get to see them on this weekend." I get the funny feeling they're going to be somewhere at the track later today. Junior Motorsports locking down at least one car for the 2025 season. They have signed Xfinity Series veteran Justin Allgaier to what they're terming a long-term contract extension. How long-term? Well, not only did Allgaier sign it, his long-term sponsor, Brandt, signed the extension to run through the same length as well. It'll run through the 2026 season at least. Brandt, in the deal, will be Allgaier's primary sponsor for at least 20 races the next 2 years and be an associate sponsor for the remaining races, and that's not a small thing to talk about when you talk about 33 races in an Xfinity year. Brandt and Allgaier have a long history. They go back to 2011. They joined Junior Motorsports together in 2016. The two sides have been title contenders ever since. They qualified for the playoffs each year that they've been in use by NASCAR, and in 6 of the past 8 years, they've made the championship 4. runner-up results coming in 2020 and just last year, but falling short of a series title each time. He enters this weekend's racing 32 points above the cut line, but he's not locked into the final race yet. And Dale Earnhardt Jr., since he retired from Cup Series racing full-time, has run at least one Xfinity Series race a year ever since, sometimes two. But after his most recent run, he casts some doubt on whether or not he will return to it in 2025. Keep in mind, this is not that he won't race in 2025. He's just talking about not returning to the Xfinity Series. He says he'll more than likely stick to his own Junior Motorsports, break out a noted look for his upcoming late model race at Florence Motor Speedway, the South Carolina 400. It'll be a red Chevrolet Camaro with the look of his very first ever Cup car. You remember the Budweiser-sponsored number 8? He's got the stylized number 8. He's got the Budweiser sponsorship. He's pretty much got it all. He said that it won't be a one-and-done look either. He plans to race it several more times this year and in 2025 as well. Budweiser's parent company, Anheuser-Busch, the VP of partnerships, specifically Matt Davis, said this, quote, "There are names that when mentioned draw on the significance of their place in American history. Amongst them, Budweiser and Earnhardt. The return to the racetrack alongside Dale and Bud, the King of Beer's paint scheme, is yet another chapter in Anheuser-Busch's long and storied sports history." We got the chance to look at that car. It's on Crossed Flags if you want to check it out. Very good-looking car. Tony Stewart had an off week in the NHRA this week and spent some time talking to his good friend and former teammate Kevin Harvick on his Happy Hour podcast. They ended up talking about several things. Amongst the things they got talking about the end of Stewart-Haas Racing, which Smoke will remove himself from at the end of this year. It will turn to become the Haas factory team. In 16 seasons as Stewart-Haas Racing, they won 2 Cup titles, 70 wins in Cup. They got an Xfinity Series title, 29 more wins at that level. They also actually have 1 win to the team's credit in the Craftsman Truck Series. Came in a part-time operation that ran in 2014 only with Cole Custer. He won at New Hampshire. Tony said this, quote, "This is the right time. This was never part of the master plan, but as the year has gone on, this has become very clear that this is the right time for me to get out of the sport. There's things that I definitely see that I definitely don't like. And I'm happy doing the stuff that I'm doing now. I've always been somebody that's ran all kinds of different series." Then he addressed some of the criticism that he's gotten. He said, quote, "The bashing I got online and on social media was very unjust through that process." And I'm going to say it just as he said it. So keep this in mind. Smoke said, quote, "It's easy to sit on your ass, on a chair, on your couch, in your mom's house, sit there and tell us how we're doing it wrong. But nobody can seem to sit there and come in on Monday morning and tell us how to do it right." Agreed. He then wrapped up the conversation by noting this, quote, "I don't know that it's even bittersweet. It's more bitter than sweet. It's a tough decision, but things in life change, your priorities change, and variables outside of your control change as well." As for NASCAR, which he has his differences with, he said this, quote, "NASCAR is going to be healthy. It is going to survive. It always has. It always will. But I'm happy at this point in my life to make this change. It wasn't that way at the beginning of this year. We had some different reasons as to why we had to shut down at the end of this year, but as time has gone on and watching the owners and NASCAR fight and just the chaos that's going on, I am fine being done with this at the end of this year." Can't say as I blame him. I hate it as a Stewart-Haas Racing fan, but I can't say as I blame him. Could Championship Weekend be returning to Homestead, Miami? Well, no, not next year, as the track sees their one annual race even being moved out of the playoffs to an early season event. But this has really more to do with the fact that NASCAR wants to do upgrades to the track facility. They feel that they could return to the playoffs as soon as 2026. Track president Guillermo Santa Cruz is set to oversee his first NASCAR triple-header weekend. He talked to motorsport.com about scheduling and said he actually desires to be the championship host track again in the near future. Quote, "We would love to have the championship race back. Takes a lot to bring a championship to any city. The fact that it was here for 18 years, obviously a plus because we have that tradition. We also have incredible weather that we have typically at this time of the year. Got the Florida Keys, about a 20-minute drive away. There's a lot to offer here, not only for the drivers, but for the spectators and everybody who loves motorsports. Ideally, one day the championship will come back, and I will tell you, I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't working on that and wasn't trying to make that happen. Yes, we want the championship back. That's not a secret. NASCAR, again, owns the track. They also own Phoenix Raceway. And that's where the championship weekend has been since 2020. They haven't commented yet. Matt and Coach Matt and I, had the opportunity, as we have said on numerous occasions, to be able to go down and be the PA team, part of the PA team for the final one in 2019. And I will say this, it is a very nice facility. It's a beautiful place. The weather's great when you're talking about mid to late November. If you get the championship race back, yes, it's ideal. That's why they're in Phoenix. The weather's great there too. There's only, as we have talked about on this show, a certain number of tracks that really ideally can handle hosting a championship race. Homestead, Miami is one of them. Phoenix is another. There aren't that many more, and that's the sad part of it. Speaking of sad news, one bit of IndyCar news, and it covers them, but not only them, but sports car racing. The report of the passing of noted sports car and IndyCar designer Bob Riley, not to be confused with the former Alabama governor. Riley designed winners of the Indy 500 and USAC titles on multiple occasions, not to mention cars that won almost every notable endurance racing event held in North America, including 13 Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona overall wins. 13. Not bad. Known for his open-top Daytona prototype entries, specifically the Mark 11, Mark 20, and Mark 26. They were not only the bodies designed by Bob, but the space frame chassis as well, along with his son Bill. And in those cars, drivers claimed 8 of 11 possible titles between 2005 and 2015. Noted IMSA team owner Wayne Taylor said of Riley, quote, "Just about everything I drove designed by Bob was incredible." Riley knew how to design cars for winners. First for A.J. Foyt in 1971, in evolving that car nicknamed Coyote to help Foyt win the Indy 500, his last Indy 500 win in 1977. In 1974, he also started to design sports cars, going back and forth between the two series for many years until he decided in the 1990s to concentrate on IMSA. He worked into his 80s, joking that by the time he got to his 80s, it was really only part-time, and said he wasn't actually getting to a shop as early as he used to, but he was still there usually at about 9:30 in the morning. Bob Riley passed away due to natural causes. He was 93 years old, and he will certainly be missed. So we're leaving some stuff on the table here. Don't worry about it. We can get to it next week because it's paint schemes regarding Formula E, and there's a pretty cool place up in Tennessee that just opened up. We'll talk about that all next week. And, of course, we'll be back next week right here, our regular 2-hour slot. We are looking ahead because our flagship radio station is a college football affiliate specifically for the University of Georgia. So we're looking ahead and kind of planning some things out. We think that there's going to be a YouTube-only show coming up. We'll detail all that as we get closer to it and keep you updated. And, of course, we got Crossed Flags, our podcast, up on Wednesday. Make sure that you're subscribed to CRN Live on YouTube. You'll get the notification about that and the next time that we're on the air here on the Championship Racing Network. Talk to you Wednesday and next Saturday.
This has been a presentation of the Championship Racing Network.
This James Spann weather is brought to you by Sam Boswell Honda of Gadsden. Vehicles you can depend on, people you can trust.
Another unseasonably warm day today. The sky mostly sunny, the high 84. For tonight, mostly fair with the low at 57. A little cooler tomorrow and Monday.